This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
What's up, Andrew?
Chris, I did yoga this week.
Oh,
I've
yeah?
never done yoga in my life. I did
How'd it
yoga
go?
this week.
How many muscles did you pull?
I did not pull any,
Yeah.
although I sat there and thought about pulling one for a minute, though. I was like, if I do this one more time, something's going to give.
You enjoy it?
I did. I'm trying to force myself to enjoy it because I do enjoy it. What I don't enjoy is like stopping to do it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
I think that's like the thing that I feel about going to the gym. It's not so much actually going to the gym. It's the transition from whatever I'm doing to
Right.
the gym.
Let's
If I
stop.
could just teleport there, then it would be fine. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Well, your shoe store reminded me of a study someone did where basically they proved that if you just put your gym shoes on, literally the act of doing that, and even if you don't go inside of the gym, literally just if you force yourself to go to the gym, even if you pull in the parking lot and turn around, that very act of just going there and like building up that muscle memory, eventually you'll be there and you're like, well, I'm not turning around. I'm already here.
Yeah.
But I got the Apple Fitness thing because I wanted something else and it was like part of the subscription pack. And dude, I actually like it. Also because I realized my arm is still not healed enough to go to a gym. And also, why am I kidding myself thinking I'm going to go to that dirty ass gym down the road? I'm not. So instead I'm doing like Apple TV workouts with like my girl Trish.
Nice. Yeah. Reminds me of all the like, remember when the Wii came out and they had all the Wii fitness
yeah.
stuff?
Oh,
That
dude, I
was
was
like-
about the Wii.
Yeah.
My parents wouldn't let me have an Xbox or a PlayStation. Basically anything non-Nintendo, I was not allowed to own. So, dude, let me tell you about Medal of Honor 4 on the Wii. Boy, you talking to the undisputed champion.
That's funny. But yeah, that reminds me of the best exercise I bet a lot of people got back in the day was DDR. Because boy, did people
Yeah.
get addicted to that.
Dude, I met a guy the other day. He's like, yeah, I play Magic the Gathering. That's what I do. And I was like, we could be friends. I would be willing to learn Magic the Gathering. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, I know
I would totally play.
several friends of mine play it a ton. I don't know much about it either. So, I mean, it's similar to playing D&D and stuff, but card game instead. So
Right.
all of those I'm sure are quite fun. The amount of people that play Magic and D&D and stuff, there's a lot to it. So I'm sure it's fun.
You want to know why I never got into D&D and stuff like that?
Why is that?
Because of my childhood. When I was younger, my mom and I used to play cards and she's competitive and that's where I get it from. So, dude, to evolve, I became a cheater, dude. I'm not going to lie. I'm a cheater. I cheat. That's why I don't play card games anymore because it's too tempting. I cheat. I was like marking cards as a 6-year-old playing like Old Maid.
In grade school, for whatever reason, I think they didn't have a classroom big enough for our grade or something. So we got moved to this like building that was like outside of the school, like near the parking lot. And half the building was walled off in the middle. So we had our classroom on one side and the other side had just like storage for like games and all this other stuff. So we had to go set up Monopoly and other things in the back room there. And whenever you got done with your homework, you could go back in there and play around or whatever. And we had some vicious Monopoly games like the Star Wars Monopoly and stuff. But every single time, whoever got in the back room first would tax all the other players and you'd take 100 from each person and try and hide your money and stuff. It was a blast just trying to get your homework done so you could cheat and beat everybody in Monopoly.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that pretty much everything I do in the community is like me overcompensating for the fact that I know if like I get around a board table with anyone, I will try to cheat. That being said, I got to
This will be fun to take you to Vegas.
No, I can't go to Vegas. I disallowed myself to gamble because I know I would like it. 2 shout outs. Number one, Jason Swett had his 100th podcast of Rails with Jason this week.
That's
Shout out
awesome.
him. Yeah, that's
Hell
cool.
yeah.
Second shout out, Brittany. Did you see that Brittany moved the Ruby on Rails podcast?
Yes.
That's dope.
Yeah. Out of 5x5, everything
Yeah.
seemed to go very smoothly. So that's pretty exciting.
So I have like weird knowledge about this, not because Brittany and I talked, although we did, but about just the whole 5x5. I know about 5x5 because we were involved with them slightly. The same guy that runs that, Dan Benjamin. Also, Dan Benjamin, hands down, the greatest podcaster I've ever listened to. Dude, I love listening. That guy is so good. And he had a podcast, I don't know if he's still going, but where he would just talk about podcasting. Dude, I'm telling you, that's where I was at 2020. I was listening to Dan Benjamin talk about podcasts on a podcast, but it was so,
Nice.
it was so cool. He has his own stuff, but he's been podcasting for a while. He is a Rails developer. Shout out Rails developers. And he runs Fireside, which is a podcast hosting platform that we used for at least a year when I was at CodeFund. We used it for all of the podcasts. This show was on it. Or did it? I don't think it ever
We
did
never,
switch.
no,
I think
we've always been on
supposed to, but we
Transistor.
never did.
Well, the problem is, right? Like you can't easily transfer feeds a
Heck
lot of
no.
times. They don't want you to do that. So you are stuck using whatever platform. So
It's because
Yeah.
everyone's cache gets messed up.
that's true.
Never mind. I'm
Yeah.
not going down this road, but one time I started to build a podcast app, and for the week I was the CTO of a company. This is a true story. Anyway, Paul can tell you one day. Brittany moved the whole podcast, and that's dope because the name is like a lot to that podcast, I
Right.
think, right?
Right.
That podcast is like known. Everyone knows about that podcast, and it's been around for so long. The name value and the feed itself is just like, yeah, you can't let that go. So I was really
Right.
happy that she got to keep it, that she deserves it. She's killing it over there. And there was a bunch of other 5x5 shows as well, but he's got his hands in all this other stuff. So I was really curious to see if he would let go of that podcast feed, especially because he also is a Rails developer. But I think he kind of recognized, look, he's not going to run it, right? He's managing a company and doing other stuff, and Brittany's killing it. It's like when I think of that podcast now, I don't think of anyone else. I just think of Brittany. So it's definitely hers. And she had a recruiter. She kind of like joined forces with a recruiting company. And
Yeah, I know of
I
them.
learned some hell of interesting information last night. I wrote it
Yeah?
all down too. Yeah. Number one, which made me super happy that they talked about, was a lot of companies are moving away from these freaking whiteboard interviews, dude. I
Yeah,
can't stand them.
they're
They
the
make me
worst.
angry.
Yeah.
I've
They're just not good.
no, they're not. We all know this, right? So, but the type that everyone is moving to, because I was like, man, does that mean I have to spend an hour trying to figure out how the RSpec JSON gem works again, like over take home projects? But no, the large majority of people who are trying to hire Ruby on Rails developers right now are doing it via pairing interviews, where you like pair with someone on
Mhm.
like a problem or something, which
Yep.
number one, shout out. Thank God the death of whiteboarding interviews has long been coming.
Yeah, and the pairing is like your day to day, right? Like
Right.
you gotta
Right.
spend time with that person and in a environment that's just every day, which is nice. So
Right.
like,
especially with everyone remote now.
yeah,
Like that's
Yeah.
how it's going to be. Like you and that
Yep.
person chilling on a call. That's how it's going to be.
that's really the way it should be. Last time I interviewed anywhere was 5 years ago or something, and they said no whiteboard interviews, but of course, as I got passed through the like 4 or 5 people that I was talking to, they're like, we did a pair programming one where we refactored some code or something. I don't remember. And that process is really nice because like they can give you information and withhold information too on the problem and be like, hey, we need you to go build this. And you're like, okay. And you start writing your tests and your code and everything. And then they're like, oh, wait, I forgot. We need this other feature, which like throws a wrench in there. and they get to like talk it out with you, and you ask questions about what does that mean? How does that affect this? How do you decide when to do X or Y? And they can make that tailored really nicely to be a very fun interview. Like it's actually a lot of fun to do that. And then, of course, I think after I did that one and I felt like I nailed that piece, the next person I talked to was like, hey, here's a whiteboard marker. And I was like, what do you mean? We already said that there was no whiteboard interviews.
What are you doing,
And
bro?
it was like sort a stack only using stacks. And I was
Come
like,
on.
I haven't implemented a stack in I don't know how long for some things and whatever, but like not for Rails apps. Not
No.
that often, you know,
It's
like
not
maybe if you're building an
applicable at
algorithm or something. And I was like, I don't even remember all the different operations you can do on a stack. I know you can just push and pop basically.
Why would
and-
you? Why would you
But then-
know that?
But
It's
then
so
you're
useless.
like, then you're up there. Okay, I'm pissed off that I'm doing a whiteboard interview.
Exactly.
I haven't used a stack in forever and I'm nervous. And that throws me off to the point of like, I don't know what to do. That's the issue with all the whiteboard stuff. I can't just pull up my phone and Google the stack operations and anything like that. A quick refresher. You don't have your computer in front of
Yeah.
you, but you could in the pair programming interview. And they can watch you search Google and debug things and stuff, which is like really helpful to be able to see how this person problem solves. So yeah, I'm really happy to hear that because the pair programming style seems perfect. The
That's
thing
what
you
your
don't
job
get with those,
is.
yeah, and you don't get that same
Yeah.
result with a take home either. It's like in math class where they're like, how'd you get that answer? You have to show
Yeah,
your
come
work.
on.
They want to see that you know the steps. And if you just skip from here's the problem to here's the answer, they don't know how you
Exactly.
got there. They didn't learn anything about your problem solving and stuff. And so, yeah, that seems like the way to go as long as it's kept to a reasonable time, an hour and not
Right.
8 hours worth of
No.
hearing.
Are you
people.
kidding me? Man, I feel all sorts of way now. Number one, you reminded me of my most memorable pair programming session, which I'm going to go out and say it, dude. I interviewed with Shopify and boy, dude, let me tell you, dude, the whole yard, all the dirt, dude, my face was in it, dude. I did not do well at all in that code interview, which is probably one of the most embarrassing things to me. Like when I think back about my career, I'm like, damn, that was so stupid. And that's when I kind of just realized, like, look, I don't work in Final Destination. I'm thinking this is also a generational thing. When I need to figure something out, I go find the answer. I don't necessarily keep it in local storage in my head, right? Because that's not what my brain's for. So I don't know why we're like interviewing people like that's what's going to happen, because it's not what's going to happen
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
You're going to interview
Yeah.
them like they're going to be under a microscope, and really you're going to be able to like take your shoes off and eat pizza in 2 weeks, like on your
Mhm.
desk. So like, why are you
Well,
treating
and-
them like this?
And I think this is an important piece to make interviewing fair to junior devs too, who are going to be extra nervous and they're also not going to really have all these same things memorized and they won't have seen as many things. So like you want to be with them and talking with them for an hour, not here's a take home project or let's
Right.
whiteboard stuff. Because it may turn out that, yeah, they don't know a whole lot, but boy, can they learn fast. And if you explain them a concept, they can go and execute on it. And you'll be able to pick up on that immediately in a pair programming interview, but not in a take home project or whiteboards or whatever. So I think that's good. And yeah, the junior placements need to be figured out because that is a sorely lacking piece of the community right now. I think that's probably one of the biggest flaws of Ruby and Rails right now, I would say.
Dude, so number one, nice segue. Even though you didn't even do it on purpose. But that's where I was.
Or did
segueing.
I?
Or did you? I don't know. Brittany is hiring right now. She was talking about that. So this entire episode, number one, if you're out there right now and you're like, I'm trying to get a Rails job, you need to stop what you're doing. Well, wait, after you're done with this podcast, because we got to tell you about Honey Badger, right? But after that, then you need to go listen to this podcast because I'm going to publish these after this show. I made 13 highlights in a podcast note-taking app called Air, which does like auto transcription and all this crap, whatever, not the important part. And the entire thing was like basically telling what people are looking for. Brian, I can't remember his last name, but his name is Brian. He runs a consulting company. These are the people that are going to be interviewing you. You should most definitely listen to anything they say, right? Because when I think of a recruiter, I think about all the freaking LinkedIn spam I'm getting right now. But the recruiters are really like, you got to be nice to them, right? Because they can come in the clutch for you later. Like I had a recruiter just hit me up out of nowhere. He got my phone number, which pissed me off because I didn't know how he got it. But that's not the point. He helped me out a lot. So you should definitely listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's their job, connecting companies that are hiring. You can do that yourself, but guess what? You're only going to be able to find X number of companies because that's what you found in your Google searches and stuff. But the companies that are hiring that aren't necessarily publishing on We Work Remotely or like the Go Rails job board or whatever, like they have all these other connections. So it's super useful to be in touch with a recruiter and just find good people. Some recruiters are not good, but others can be. Like one of my friends, he got a job with a recruiter and the job was pretty good for a while and then things shifted and he's able to just reach back out to that same recruiter and they're able to help him find a different job, you know, and like that's pretty handy to have. Save you a lot of time and hopefully find you opportunities that you wouldn't have found on your own too.
Yeah. Just to say a quick note about the shifty ones, we'll call them. That's just like something that you're going to have to like, as an adult, just start to like think about and realize that like, hey, this person I'm talking to, like he's got an objective and it's not me finding a job. It's like him getting a paycheck. So you gotta figure out the type of person they are in order to figure out, is this person going to sell me to something crappy or not?
I mean, the same thing happens when you're interviewing too. Like the companies are selling you on this magical dream job. And like, the reality is it's probably not that. After a while, I worked at several different places and I started to realize I was mostly worried about getting the job and not worried about asking enough questions to find out if I would even enjoy the job. I was like so worried about, are they going to accept me and whatever, that I didn't pay enough attention to how do these people work? What do they care about? What's their values? Will that make sense for me to work there for 5 years or something? Or is it like a 1 year long thing and I'm just doing it for, I don't know, the paycheck or to learn fast or whatever. And I will say too that you mentioned consulting. I found that to be extremely useful when I was a junior, because when you're consulting, you get thrown at a million different projects that are all very different. And so you're like always kind of being thrown under the bus to like go learn something that you've never done before. And it's a really good way to train yourself quickly to go figure out how to solve different problems that you've never seen before. I really like that because in a product company, you end up getting into maintaining the same thing and hopefully you get to add some more features, but a lot of it's bug fixing and other little things. And it's not necessarily the same kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm kidding. You're right though. It's a routine. It's not a startup.
You're like a maintainer.
Yeah. It's what you do. Like you tend the garden, bro.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to do both of those in your career and get experience on both sides. Cause like I learned really fast in consulting, but I hated it for the long term. Like I would never be able to survive just having all these projects that you build and then throw away and maybe never touch again, or the client never actually uses it, even though they paid you $100,000 to build some nonsense. It just wasn't fulfilling for me in the long term, but I credit a lot of getting up to speed very fast to that. That's the job that I first dropped a production database in. So,
dude, nice.
Luckily,
I still haven't gotten my badge, dude. I'm waiting for it. Don't tell I know it'll happen one day. No, I'm very upfront about it because I make it a big deal because I know one day it will happen. Something bad will happen. Hasn't yet.
Well, be like a good developer who has tested restoring their backups first.
I don't do that.
My saving grace was that I dropped the production database, but it was a database that was, I think, 100% imported nightly from somewhere else, some feed. So luckily, destroying the database was just another import and we were fine. But yeah, I got lucky.
Dude, just one more point on that, and then I want to push this somewhere. I'm not going to say who the person was. You can go figure it out for yourself. But I know of a Ruby developer who accidentally deleted like DigitalOcean's database, and DigitalOcean did not rat them out like HBO did with the intern. I've like looked back at that like incident response, because I think that's also like a lot of like incident response articles point to that now. Something terrible happened. Like the worst thing that could possibly happen just happened. We, a hosting company, just had our database deleted because someone accidentally ran a test command in production. And we all know that damn database cleaner gem don't play. And the whole thing is gone. And now you have to restore your backup, which like, thank God you have a backup. But like, now you have to restore all that data. And you're not.
And there will be missing data between the backup and whatever
and
time. So
I imagine that DigitalOcean doesn't have Google teraflop like stuff running under their building. That's a slow transfer, dude. That's just like time right there.
Yep. That's one of those moments where it's faster to go physically drive a hard drive somewhere to restore versus doing it over the internet.
And I've seen people have to drive before. Like, crap, I gotta go.
It happens all the time.
It does. Take backups, people. I almost got screwed this week, but I'm not going to get us into that. I accidentally hit restart now instead of restart later. And no one was restarting. But I took a few quick notes on this podcast that I think are important, and I'm sure you'll have opinions on. Number one, again, shout out to Brittany on the new feed. Ooh, it's brand new. It's sparkling. So a lot of Rails developers are probably noticing messages are on fire right now. So if you're looking for a Rails job, you need to get your ass on LinkedIn. Pretty sure my company, that's what they did too. They were like, we need a Rails developer. And whoever the person that was like, that's my thing, I do that. They just went on LinkedIn and found
a lot.
Like some great developers. So you need to be on LinkedIn and you need to be responding to those people in your inbox. Number two.
Also, you need to be on the Go Rails job board too.
You need, I'm getting to that. You need to be out there.
89 jobs on the Go Rails job board, and it's only been up for a month, which is amazing.
Damn. That's impressive.
The only downside is it's like senior, full stack, senior, CTO, senior. There's some Java jobs on here too.
Some Java. Bro,
however those ended up on here. But
I guess if you were writing JRuby.
Yeah, I could see that.
So one thing that Brian said that I thought was super cool is that there are a lot of old companies that are obviously trying to find recruiters to find them like Rails devs to take care of the crap that the job postings that you're looking at right now are like, hey, bro, so we've had this Rails app for a while and we need someone senior to come fix it, but they actually need someone senior to come fix it because just figuring out what's going on is going to be most of their job anyway. But a lot of new companies are hiring for Ruby on Rails developers. That got me lit. So that's good to hear that people are still choosing Rails. It sounds like a lot. So when the companies are looking for Ruby developers, they're almost always looking for a Rails developer. So I'm pretty sure that is not the norm in every other country where Ruby is a thing. I think that's primarily a US artifact because like in Japan, they have that crap in space and stuff. They're like building whatever that space junk is that floats around. And submarines, maybe. Still got to find that submarine. No one's found the
yellow submarine.
I need that submarine. The other thing is that one point that they kept talking about is that you need to be ambitious. They kept saying the word ambition and you need to have ambition. And I'm going to kind of summarize what I think that means real quick because I have some real hot takes on that I'm not going to like air out right now, right here. But here's the thing. And once you go listen to the podcast, you'll know even more that like companies are looking for people who are good at pairing. So like you as a developer who's looking to find a Rails job, need to be figuring out, how do I pair with people?
Yeah.
All right.
Like just practice with friends or anybody that wants to.
But see, here's the thing. Anyone at all, you should be like on Twitter, on GitHub, scoping. And I mean this like with all sincerity. If I was maintaining a gym, and I've actually done this before, so maybe I'm not the greatest. So I'll ask you, if you're maintaining some gym and you get like some bug report, and then a junior shows up in the issues, it's like, here, I've already done some preliminary research. All right. Don't come empty handed. If I were like, hey, I've already done all this research. I think I could get it, but I could use some help. Would you be willing to pair with me on it? I feel like
Absolutely.
the majority of people will say yes. Not
here's
everyone.
the thing.
For sure, not everyone.
Here's the thing that I've started doing over the past, say, 6 or 7 years with Go Rails. I get so many questions from people that are like, could you explain me this or that or whatever, or can we pair or anything like that? The instant thing that I can see that separates someone from the rest is if you come with details, you've already attempted this, you've gotten so far, here's what you understand, here's what you don't understand, here's where you need help or advice on. And if you go that extra mile and actually bring everything to the table, you make it easy for me to help with and say yes. If someone was like, hey, there's a bug in Pay and it doesn't do this, I expect it should be doing this instead. Can you help me or give advice on like how to fix it? Because I'd love to help. Then yeah, I'd be absolutely down to do that. There's a lot of those times where it's like the opposite though, where it's, this is broken. No context, no information, no examples. And if you're not willing to put in that much effort, then I'm not willing to put in the effort to fix it. Because half the time those things are actually like intentional anyways, where it's we chose not to do that on purpose. It's not supposed to work that way or whatever. Or adding that feature would make it really complicated for us to maintain and it's not worth the effort. There's a lot of that happening in open source too. And I think Nate Berkopec talks about that often, about the burden of maintaining open source stuff, like something very active like Puma, and the people who can contribute are the ones who are like there to work together on it. It's not just like you broke this or it's broken, fix it for me. It's the collaborative thing. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on that.
Chris, you know what really just bugs me?
It seems like it's on the tip of my tongue.
Bugs.
Oh, dang it. I knew it.
All bugs.
Of course.
Real bugs, bugs in my app, Bugs Bunny, anything with a bug in it bugs me.
I can see why.
So I'm asking Chris for your professional opinion as a thought leader in the industry. How should I handle these bugs?
You know, I learned in school that honey badgers are really good with bug problems.
Do you mean a literal honey badger?
Or maybe honeybadger.io.
But if I sign up for Honey Badger, what do I get?
Well, something that is really useful that actually just saved my butt the other day was their uptime monitoring. I was doing an update on one of my apps and made a deploy and didn't notice right away that it went down. So that was a really good, useful feature there. Not to mention that they've got your error monitoring for those bugs. Yeah. You should go check out Honey Badger, it sounds like.
Sounds like it. See you, Chris.
I've got some hot takes that I'm, again, not going to air out. But like, don't show up in my DMs if I don't know you and say, can you mentor me? There's like the tail end of some spice.
That one's the same situation though. I think it's like, you never ask somebody to be your mentor. You just ask them questions and do the exact same thing we just talked about. Bring them a specific problem that they can help you with. And if you do that a handful of times, then guess what? You're going to end up being friends and they'll probably want to hire you because they've gotten to know you, you know, and then, oh, look, they're your mentor and you never asked. The best mentors are ones you don't have to just be like, hey, will you take me under your wing? Get involved with them, help them on maintaining open source or whatever. And then they'll end up being your mentor, even though it was never explicit.
And just to touch on mentorship. Number one, if your goal is to find a mentor and you don't know why, then just go on back and go figure that out.
Go read.
That's step one.
Go read the book Mastery, because the whole book is kind of about mentorship, where it talks about like all these different people who became phenomenal at whatever it was that they did. But they all started out with a mentor. Some people didn't have mentors in person. They had mentors that were like writing books. And so they learned through those books. And like at a point you end up to become like a master in the book. They're talking about eventually you have to surpass your mentor or break past them or whatever. Cause like your mentor is always going to kind of be,
that's the goal of mentoring.
Your mentor is going to share all the stuff they know, but you're going to have to bring your own thing to it, which means you're going to have to break away from them at some point. And then eventually when you're in master, like you can challenge the fundamentals that everybody just assumes is the way it should be done. But then you can go and say like, here's a brand new approach and a new philosophy or whatever. And it's like mastery. So that book, if you are interested, is fantastic. I've read it like probably 30 times. I was in that point of my life where I was like, what am I doing with my life? And then reading that was like, you should find something and get really, really good at it. And I was like, okay, I can do that. Like figure out what it is. I got to find that first, but you know, that makes a lot of sense.
And here's the thing. Someone out there I know right now is screaming, but how are they supposed to know this? We're telling them right now. Here it is. There you go. Now that problem's out of the way, this is how it has to be. Don't just go look for a mentor. Here's the thing. Like if that's the approach, then I'm already like kind of skeptical. This is a little harsh, but I'm just going to be real. Like this is how it is. And we all kind of know that like first impressions are very important. And when you start to recognize how they're important to you, you start to realize just how important they are. I feel like, and this is such a bias, but like, this is what I believe. And I know other people believe it too, if they think about it, that I can tell whether or not it's worth me like investing emotional energy in someone in like under 5 minutes. I can almost tell whether or not how easy or where they are on the path to like success just based on their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that attitude is like, you need to be out there all the time. You have to break a lot of like uncomfortable barriers in yourself. I know that's why it's hard because I'm very introverted, but that hasn't stopped me from playing extrovert on the internet because that's what I do. I'm not like this in person, right? I am introverted. I'm not weird, but like I'm quiet.
But maybe. but that's a good point because like you have to do what works for you, you know, like if you know you're introverted, then like you can be more comfortable doing that online instead of in person at a conference or whatever. And like, great, use it to your advantage. You might be really good at that. And I think you just have to be aware of those things like that, where you're like, look, I don't really care about algorithms or, you know, being an extrovert or like all these little different things, and just accept them and just be aware of it that like, okay, I might have to do stuff differently than so-and-so who is an extrovert and they can go meet everybody and really easily. And, you know, they get advantages because of that, but you have your own advantages. You just have to like pay attention to the balance because everybody's got their own pros and cons of things they're comfortable with or whatever, and kind of embrace it. And then sometimes just challenge those too. Okay, well, I'm going to go to a conference and just introduce myself to people and try and get better at that, you know?
And that's what Jason said that he did. Like he went to conferences by himself. Yeah. I could see myself going to the conference by myself. I can't see myself hanging with people by myself. Just like if I don't know anyone, like then I'm kind of like, It's
a lot easier once you have one person at the conference you can hang out with. What was really funny was, I know I've told the story before, but like, I don't remember when RailsConf was in Kansas City, 2015 or something.
2014, 2015?
Was it
Yeah, something like that.
2014? I'm going to look it up.
Was it the light blue header? That's how I know it. This is the YouTube videos.
2016. So I wasn't going to RailsConf that year, but Jason was. And that's how we met. I was in St. Louis and drove out there because he emailed me and was just curious if I was going. And I was like, no, but screw it. I'm going to go meet this guy. That's how we met. And we've been friends ever since. You know, that was like out of my comfort zone, like meeting a stranger all the way across the state.
He could have murdered
for
you.
Drinks. He reached out and did that. Doesn't really know me. I didn't know him. Like we both took a gamble on that or whatever, and like turned out awesome. You know, to
Which
be
one of us is the serial killer?
Great friendship. Yeah. Well, and Steve Polito did the same thing of being like,
exactly,
you know,
dude,
hopping on the podcast and just out of his element. And look at him now and Colin. And
dude,
it's awesome.
Exactly. So that's literally how it happened for me too.
Yeah.
Jason Swett was making his podcast, and I was like, I need to meet people in the community. How do I do this? Because here's the thing. When you're out there like asking me without knowing who I am, like, hey, can you be my mentor? I think what you're really asking, what you should be asking is like, hey, I exist. I want you to know that I exist. And by the way, if you just so happen to like, you know, like set, like you have to like come with something. Do not come empty handed. So I was like, hey, Jason, big fan of the show. I would love to come ask you questions about Ruby testing. And I was like, here's why I think an episode about Ruby testing would be good for your show. Because I think there are a lot of juniors that listen, and your content may not always be junior focused. Oh, this was back then. And I was like, I think it would be really beneficial if we did this show. Of course, he said yes. And that's the same thing with the next podcast I was on. Then I became a panelist on the Ruby Rogues, and then we did the Ruby Blend. And then I came on here. And at the end of the day, it's literally, you just got to ask. You have to learn how to ask the right way. And you have to learn how to ask people for stuff without them realizing that you're asking. It has to be like a win for me. If you just drop in my DMs and you're like, hey, teach me Rails, like I have bleepity words about how I feel about that interaction, right? But if you're like, here's your road guide. First, you have to get a Twitter. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Number 2, you have to obviously be on LinkedIn. Number 3, you need to find every Ruby developer you possibly can on Twitter, follow them, and you have to be engaging. You have to engage about what they're doing. You know who's really good at this? Connor. Connor is excellent at this. Connor is all over everyone's mentions, and everyone knows who Connor is.
Yep.
Everyone knows who Connor is. That's how you do it. You have to start showing up, because then you're not a stranger, right, to everyone, right? If you've been interacting with me, and then you message me and you're like, hey man, like, I'm sorry to bother you. Feel free to ignore this, but like, look, I heard you talking the other day on Remote Ruby about blah. Okay. You have to establish that connection with them. You have to give me something, right? By telling me that you're a fan of my work. And pretty much every developer is like this, dude. Any developer, no matter how crappy the library is, if you tell them that you're using their library, it's like Christmas. We love it. Yeah. It's addictive.
That's why you do it.
No matter what. Yeah, exactly. So no matter what, if you try to create some connection with them, like, hey, I saw this gem that you created, and I was actually looking at it, and I had this question, or like I hit this bug. Like for me personally, there's a damn good chance if I see that at like a certain time, I'm gonna be like, hey, you want to show me? I offer that a lot. And here's the thing. There's only been 2 people who have ever said yes to that, or no, 3. One of them is, we're not going to talk about one of them. The point is that one of them was Colin, and Colin, I very distinctly remember, is the first junior, because I've offered to do it with more than one. The first junior I've ever offered to pair with who said yes, ever.
Yeah.
Come on. Number 1, if a Rails developer with a job, if you are looking for a job, let's just talk common sense here. If you're looking for a job and someone with a job who's doing the job that you want to do offers to do that with you, you should say yes. And saying no is not the way to do it, right? Because that's connections, and it's all about building connections. That's how you get a job. You have to build
Yeah,
connections and make yourself known. You have to be helpful. Again, I think of Connor.
Yeah.
Connor's the most helpful dude.
If you don't know where to start on that, you can chime in and help answer questions anywhere. You can promote their stuff. Just start chatting with people, and you don't have to like contribute anything at first. You'll figure that out as you go. It's just, you just need to be around.
Try to make friends.
Yeah.
Colin said this the other day that I think he hit it on the nose. Obviously, your goal is to get a job. That's obviously what you're doing. But in order to get people to want to do stuff with and for you and like recommend you and like all of this stuff that like is the pathways to jobs, if you approach it like, I just want to make friends, dude, there are so many people out there who are totally down to be friends with anyone. Right?
Because guess what? That's what you want with coworkers. You want to be friends.
Exactly. And that's how you establish relationships. I paired with Colin that one night. And to that point, when I thought of him, I was like, oh, that's that junior developer who went out of his way to like, try to pair with me. And like, he did, he showed up. He had already like investigated the problem. It was fun, dude. It's fun. And now today, just bring it all the way around. I meet with Colin every week and I basically mentor him. And we do cool stuff together now. Like, it's not like a relationship where like, one of us is the parent or something. It's like, we're friends now. We do stuff. And when you become friends with people, people want to help out their friends. I don't necessarily want to help out someone on the internet. I don't know.
You don't want to help them out because you don't know if it's going to be appreciated or it's your reputation you're putting on the line sometimes. And like, there's a lot of questions along with that, So this gets around all of those questions and makes it easy.
Well, and that's the thing. If you don't know that person, you might not want them to be your mentor. They may steer you down a very bad path and they may not know anything, right? The only way for you to know if it would be a good relationship is for you to get to know them and vice versa. And also, the last thing I'll say about this is there are a bunch of Ruby projects. Puma is one of them. And I'm pretty sure the Hanami crew does this sometimes too. And I know there are more who have office hours. You know who else does this? Is Ruby for Good. They do this as well. They assign a senior programmer to a project and they have these office hours where they will pair with you on that project. Just like the Hanami and Puma. Dude, people pay a lot of money to hang out with Nate Berkopec. All right. And he's offering to do it with you for free as long as you don't come empty handed. Like, you can't just show up and be like, sup, what now? If you're looking for a job and you're not doing that, that's step number one, is like these office hours with these very senior project leaders who are very well known throughout the community, who are speakers at conferences, who make stuff on YouTube. Everyone knows who they are. And they're offering to work with you on Rails and Ruby for free. If I went to one of those office hours and it was empty, I would lose my brains, dude. That would be it for me. I'm like, obviously you don't want this job. Like, that's what it all goes back to. And what they were saying on Brittany's podcast, you have to be ambitious. Most people are not going to do it, no matter, even if you offer them. And here's the thing. Most people, if I like try to help you and you like, I don't want to say don't do what I say, but
didn't try,
didn't even refute or something, like, there's no, it's like, yeah, I'll try that. But like, that's it. And just that's like the last thing you hear from them. I'm never talking to you again. Like until I'm not initiating conversation with you probably ever again until you reach out back to me.
When we started LaunchCode, which is a kind of an apprenticeship program for developers, we interviewed so many people in 3 days, and doing 100 and some interviews in 3 days really quickly got me to the point of, in 2 questions, I can ask you basically like, what have you done outside of school? And if you've never built anything for fun and we're never curious to like go program, and we were like, okay, well, I don't think you're a good fit because like you're trying to get a job as a junior, as a programmer at a company, and you've never written code for fun. You don't have to do that, but like,
sure, you definitely don't have to. I can teach people how to write Ruby. I can teach people how to write Rails. I can teach people how to use a computer. The ability to try to solve your own problem. That's all it is, dude. That's literally, if you can't do that, I'm sorry. Like, I know I'm coming across kind of harsh here, but like, this ain't for you. You have to be willing to do the work. This is not a job where someone's going to just tell you, sir.
And the thing is, like, you can't teach them to be curious. And it's not like
I don't even think it has anything to do with that. Something. It's just like, you have to figure out how to solve. Well, if you have a problem, you have to figure out how to, what do I do next? Not solve the problem necessarily, but like figure out what is the next step. I'm stuck. What do I do now? If your answer is shut down.
You have to like want to solve those things. Like, you have to be curious how to do it, how to make sure that you remember how to do that for the next time and things, you know, like it's not a mechanic's job where like you're doing 10 brake jobs a week and they're all exactly the same. Pretty much everything you do in programming is, you may implement devise 500 times, but sometimes you're going to be doing devise with OAuth integrations or confirmable or, you know, some other weird requirement. And like each one of those times you have to like go reinvent some piece of it. And it's always pretty different no matter what you build. So there's a level of like, you have to be interested in this stuff enough to go solve those problems and like remember that it's a skill you're building and you're not just
and
like
not give up.
Yeah, you're like, this is not a repetitive task that you're going to do as a programmer. You're going to be doing new things constantly, especially when there's a new JavaScript framework every week. So, you know,
I don't want to talk about JavaScript right now. I don't want to talk about it.
The good news is there's only a new Rails release every 3 years or something now. Sad face.
It's not sad because it freaking works. I don't even want to get into this. I'm getting heated. Last thing I'll say is like, just like a quick tip. I would say the best way, other than learning people skills, which is probably maybe learning how to communicate, I'll actually specifically narrow down. If you want to get better at writing Ruby and doing Ruby, you should just start reading Ruby. And I'm not saying start with like Rails. Definitely don't start with Rails. But like find like those small, tiny little gems that you use that do like one small little thing and just read them. Like when you reach to pull a gem in, just read it. Read all of it. And even if you don't understand it, just read it.
Yeah. Like go through active support because they're all tiny methods added to all these different things. And they're not very big individually, but they're really handy. So it's like a really good one to go through.
Well, yeah. And the reason why I say that, if you just start reading code, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it all of the time, right? Because eventually you will, and that's just practice. But here's the thing. Now you know the key to programming is building relationships between things, right? So if I'm solving devise, and I also need to solve this other thing, if I just start piecing together bits of code that I remember, or if I just know where to go, there's a lot of times on programming where like, okay, I know exactly what I need right now and I know exactly where it is. And I go onto some GitHub repo somewhere or dig in some bookmarks and pull out some piece of code. You don't have to remember the code, but by reading code, you'll start to remember like, oh, in this gem, they created this thing with Thor. I read this one gem and it was a really good Faraday implementation with a client gem. And you just start like remembering, like then when you're at work and they're like, hey, we need to build this client side integration in. Well, I know how to do that with Faraday. And that's the tool a lot of people use. So
yeah,
there you
you'd
go.
be surprised how much of my code for Jumpstart and everything else is just influenced by the way the Rails source code attacks different problems. Because I'm trying to make my stuff feel Railsy. So reading the Rails source code gives me ideas of like, oh yeah, they used class attributes here for this interesting thing. Keeping track of validations on my models. Guess what? I could use that same approach over here in notifications or something. And having all those like mental bookmarks, if I ever need to solve a problem like this, I can remember, go look at the source code for this other thing, and we can use it as a template. That is something I do constantly, and it's really, really useful. So I approve of this message.
I need to build something. Let me find something else that's doing this and figure out how they're doing it. That's what Stack Overflow is. That's how
Yeah.
we program.
Everything is a remix.
Yeah. Well, I'm done. I'm just going to say that, like, obviously there's tons of bias and tons of privilege that's built into my story. Like, I literally told companies no who wanted to interview me. Like, that's ridiculous. Most people aren't. I was just lucky, but I got lucky by making friends.
Yeah.
So if you have a different opinion or a different background, because I know like we have one viewpoint, there's obviously so many, let us know. Maybe you get on the show and you talk to us about it, because I know I'd be down for that.
We'd love to hear those stories, because there's a million different ways you can attack things. It is always awesome to see unique approaches and new ways of doing things, you know?
Just new ways, new ideas, dude. That's what we like. And that's how you get in front of thousands of Rails developers. Or you submit a Ruby radar submission, you write a blog post about something, submit it to us, and then you get in front of almost 700 or 800 now developers.
That's awesome. That grew fast.
So did Joe's Hotwire one.
Yep.
So
you're going to be going after Ruby Weekly pretty fast.
It's a different market, dude. I built it because I knew it was a different market, because there are people who just want to read links, dude. And I am hands down one of those people, dude. And then there are people who want to read Ruby Weekly. I'm pandering to like the goldfish out there like me, who like, I just want to see a list of things. And if one of them looks cool, then I'm going to click on it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. I think that was good. You know, when you're trying to find a job, even when you're well into your career, finding a good job that you want to keep for a while is...
It sucks. It's the worst.
There's never 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do these things in this order and you'll get a job. It doesn't work like that, you know? Like it's as open-ended as a lot of things in life. And that's kind of what makes it tough. And it's especially tough right now just because there's less companies hiring juniors right now. But these are all things that like you'll stand out so fast from the other applicants if you're like just thorough and curious about this stuff and doing what you say you're going to do. And it's not that hard to stand out. It's kind of surprising, but if you do the right things, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, dude. Because if I was interviewing 3 candidates and just one of them was like, if they were all around the same level and one of them was like, oh yeah, and like whenever I can, I like hop into like Nate Berkopec's stream, or like I read blog posts from so-and-so, it's going to make you stand out completely differently, especially because companies like need people who know what's going on in the community. Anyway, I'm done. All opinions and all feedback are Jason's, and Jason's alone. Chris and I are not responsible for how you handle this material. No, I'm kidding. Chris, have a great week. I'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. We'll catch you later.